Welcome to Hometime. I'm Joanne Liebler.
And I'm Dean Johnson. On this videotape, we'll give you step-by-step instructions for doing finished carpentry in the interior of your home.
We'll show you how to hang passage doors, pocket doors, and bifold doors. We'll show you how to install the casing that goes around windows and doors. We'll put in some baseboards, a fireplace mantle, and wainscoting.
We'll also give you some tips on matching new trim to the existing millwork in your house.
We recommend that you watch the whole tape once and write down the counter numbers from your VCR in each section.
Then go back to that section of the tape that demonstrates the project you're considering and review it thoroughly.
You want to help me get this door out of the way?
Sure.
Hometime is made possible by Chevy Truck, who brings you Chevy full-size pickups. Today's big pickups for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Chevy S10 pickups, today's compact pickups that play as hard as they work. Chevy S10 Blazer, today's sport utility vehicle in 2- or 4-wheel drive. Chevy Astro, today's compact van with 2-wheel drive and new all-wheel drive models. Nobody's winning like the heartbeat of America. Today's truck is Chevrolet.
The National Hometime PBS series is brought to you weekly by Chevy Truck in conjunction with the Stanley Works. Thanks for buying this videotape.
We hope after watching it, you'll agree that it contains a lot of helpful information for whatever home improvement project you're planning.
We also hope you realize that neither the Hometime video library nor the PBS series would be possible without the continued generous support of Chevy Truck.
Without Chevy's underwriting, this tape might cost substantially more.
So thanks to you for watching, and thanks to Chevy Truck.
Finished carpentry is more exacting work than the rough carpentry that goes into framing a house. Here you're joining wood, making clean, mitered, or angled cuts to achieve flush joints and corners. The wood covers up the gaps between adjoining surfaces, like where a door jamb meets the drywall. This treatment also highlights the interior element, like a frame around a painting. This gives you an overview of several finished carpentry applications. Now we'll show you the steps and the techniques that are involved.
And we'll start with a passage door upstairs. All set?
Yeah.
Let's go. Interior moldings come in many decorative shapes and patterns, both in softwoods and hardwoods. You can also find them in plastic and polymer construction with simulated wood grain.
Selecting molding is as much a matter of personal taste as it is the architecture of the home. And for our country cottage style of home, we went with a Princeton base and a Princeton casing because of its simplicity and its richness.
When ordering molding, be sure to take into consideration the amount of waste generated by making 45-degree miter cuts.
Our first task is to install this door between the bedroom and the hallway. And interior doors, or passage doors as they're also called, come available as pre-hung units already attached to the jamb. The holes are pre-drilled for the doorknob and for the lock set. And since the casing is typically attached on one side of the door, it makes the installation a lot easier.
When ordering pre-hung doors, or any interior door for that matter, be sure to check the dimensions of your rough opening. And the rough opening is the inside dimension between these two vertical studs and the dimension between the header and the floor. Now, pre-hung units come in standard sizes. This one's a 2.4. You can also get 2.0, 2.6, 2.8, and 3.0, for example. Or you can order door jambs tailored to fit in odd-size openings.
You should also establish which direction you want the door to swing, and then make a note of the hinge side of the door on the rough opening.
Before we hang the door, we'll mark the middle of the rough opening.
And we also mark the center on the door.
First thing we want to do is center the unit in the rough opening. Okay, you got it in there?
Yeah, let me get my hands out of
We'll
here.
do it right there. And pushing the casing tight up against the finished walls. And taking a level, we plumb the hinge side of the door. Of course, the longer the level, the more accurate the reading. Okay, Joe, right there.
Next, we drill a pilot hole at the top and then drive a nail in to hold it in place. Oak open slit under the hammered point of a nail. By drilling pilot holes, we reduce the resistance. These holes should be located where the nail will penetrate a framing member.
All right, with our casing pre-drilled and our hinge side here attached, we can now square up the door by checking the reveal. And the reveal is the gap between the door and the jamb. If this isn't uniform all the way around the door, we could have binding problems. Seeing how our reveal isn't consistent, we adjust the casing, raising it up just a hair. Now we can drive a nail in the corner. Then we check the reveal on the lock side, starting at the bottom and working our way up. That's good right there. Along the outside edge here, we're driving 6 penny nails, which will penetrate the drywall and the stud. I'm positioning these about every 16 inches. When nailing, we're careful not to dent the surface with a hammer by driving the finish nail flush with the wood. Instead, we drive the nail to its head. Then taking a nail set, we place it on the head of the nail perpendicular to the wood and sink it just below the surface. The rule of thumb here is to set the nail as deep as the nail head is wide. We'll fill this impression with wood putty after the casing's been stained and sealed.
With the casing secure, we can now focus our attention on the other side of the door, and we'll put shims in between the jamb and the framing members. This is done by inserting one shim butt end first, then adding another with a narrow end, and pushing and pulling till they're snug. If there isn't enough room for the butt end to fit, you can just score it a couple times and break it off. Or if the gap is too narrow, like here on the other side, just use a single shim. You want the shims snug, but not so much that they alter the plumb of the jamb. Now on the hinge side of the door, you insert shims at hinge level or anywhere along the jamb where it's bowed out of plumb. And on the lock side of the door, you insert shims about 4 inches down from the top, a couple inches from the bottom, and both above and below the door latch. And that's to support it against the constant banging of the door. And once your jamb is secure to the framing, you just score your shims and snap them off.
Now the next thing we want to do is case the other side of the door. The unit comes with pieces of casing cut to the rough length. All we have to do is miter the corners to fit the jamb.
We'll start by taking a combination square and marking the 1/4 inch setback on the top and side jambs. This tells us where to make our miter cuts. Pencil marks should be made very lightly on the wood with a sharp, hard lead pencil. Some prefer using a utility knife for this, and that's just fine as long as it isn't a pen or a marker that'll later bleed through the finish.
Okay, now we lay a length of casing up against the jamb, like so, and transfer the mark we made on the jamb to the casing. This gives us the inside dimension of our miter cut.
And we do the same thing on the other side.
Because of the number of cuts we'll be making, we'll be using a power miter saw. Now the way you make a 45-degree miter cut on one of these is to loosen the handle, pivot the arm around like so, and tighten the handle back down. Position the casing where the cut should go, and make your cut. While I'm here, I'll also pre-miter the other side casing and one side of the head casing.
Now with one side piece up to the jamb so that it just covers the pencil mark, I nail it in. Here along the inside edge, I'm using 4 penny finish nails. For the head casing, I set the pre-mitered end in place, then mark the other end, miter it, and check the fit. Okay, well that looks good. Now before nailing it up, I run a little bit of glue along the mitered edge. I want to keep it toward the back to prevent any glue from squeezing out on the face. Okay, now I'll secure it. Should any glue come through the joint, it's best to let it dry completely before removing it. When it's wet, it can smear on the wood and show through the finish.
All right, with the other side up now, we want to pull our casing together flush here at the miter. To do this, I'll drive a 4-penny nail down through the joint. Now, once the casing's on, but before it's been stained, it's a good idea to go over the surface with a cleaning solvent to remove any fingerprints or smudges that could show through the finish. For a door to swing properly, you need at least a 1/4-inch clearance between the finished floor or carpet and the bottom of the door. If you're installing a door in a room where the carpet will be fairly thick and could impede the swing of the door, you may have to cut off part of the bottom of the door. And Joe will show you how to do that.
All of our doors are solid wood, so if we needed any more clearance, it'd be a simple matter of undercutting them. However, with hollow core doors, things get a little trickier. Typically, hollow core doors only give you so much wood framing at the top and bottom of the door. The rest is usually a honeycomb of cardboard. Now, before doing any cutting, make sure that there's enough framing to cut without causing the door to become too flimsy to support the panels. To start, apply a strip or two of masking tape on the door where the cut will be made. The masking tape helps prevent the wood from tearing along the edge with the upward cutting action of the circular saw blade. Next, measure the amount you need to trim off the bottom, then score a line with a sharp utility knife. To ensure a straight cut, clamp a board to the door to serve as a guide for the saw. Now, if you need to remove more framing than the door will allow, then Plan B goes into effect. Here, you first cut for height. Then, pry the paneling off the rail and scrape it clean. Then, knock off the ends. Next, cut and clear away the cardboard filler and scrape away any old glue. Now reglue the rail and then insert it between the panels. Make sure that it's flush with the bottom edge. Finally, clamp the panels until the glue sets up. The same techniques we used in trimming out the door apply to the windows as well, with the addition of a piece that goes along the bottom here. So our first step is to take our combination square and mark our inside miters on the jamb. Next, with the bottom piece pre-mitered at one end, I set it up to the mark and locate the miter on the other end. Make the cut. And nail the bottom piece in.
Now, it's a little too thick. If you've ever run into a situation where one piece of casing is thicker than the adjoining piece, you can always shave a little off the backside using a block plane to correct the joint. The block plane is a small plane that fits in the palm of your hand. Its cutting blade should be adjusted for a low angle for shaving down the mitered edge. Holding it flat on the back of the casing, make fine, thin cuts, working the wood down, and checking the joint often to make sure you haven't removed too much. And with a flush fit, we can nail it in. On multiple opening windows like this one, there's an additional piece of molding to add. This is called a mullion strip, and it's installed on the center vertical jambs like so. Another element of the house that requires finished carpentry is the baseboard. Like window and door casing, it serves a function that's both aesthetic and practical. It protects the sides of the wall from scuffing from shoes, furniture, and vacuums. And it can come in anywhere from 1 to 3 pieces: the baseboard, the base shoe, and the base cap. In this particular house, we'll be using a Princeton base with a 1/4-round base shoe.
We also need to take into account the thickness of the finished flooring and raise our base up accordingly. Now, the pre-finished wood flooring is 3/4 of an inch thick. So we're going to raise our base up to 7/8 of an inch, and that'll allow enough clearance for the wood flooring to slip in under the base. And any leftover gap will be covered up by the base shoe.
Most baseboard millwork is sold by the linear foot in lengths from 6 to 16 feet. To minimize time in cutting, we want to purchase lengths that span the entire distance of each wall. Now, this isn't possible on our long wall here, so we need to splice two pieces together. The best place to make a splice is at the center of a stud. This can be a butt joint or a mitered joint. We're making a 22.5-degree mitered joint. With a butt joint, there's a visible shadow line, but with a mitered joint, one piece of wood overlaps the other. So if there's any shrinkage, it doesn't matter because there's wood behind the overlap. To make the joint the least visible, there's a couple things to watch for. The first one is the grain of the wood. If one piece of wood has a straight grain and the other one kind of curly, there will be an obvious difference. And the other one is color. If one piece of wood is fairly light while the other one's dark, there will be a definite contrast. Okay. Now we're ready to nail in our first piece. To prevent cracking the wood, we'll make pilot holes at the stud locations. Nails should be located near the top and bottom of the board to prevent warpage.
There. Well, with the baseboard done on this wall, we can tackle the adjoining wall. And that means we're ready to make our coped cut for the inside corner. A coped joint is made with two cuts. First, a 45-degree miter cut. Then, using a coping saw, a back miter cut is made, carefully following the profile of the wood. I want to cut as close to the edge as possible to accept the curve of the adjoining base. After making the coped cut, I check the fit and then smooth out any irregularities with a 4-in-1 hand rasp. At the other end of this piece, I'll be cutting for an outside corner. So I'll mark on the wood for the short side of the miter, make the cut. Then with the adjoining piece pre-mitered, I check the fit. Well, we're down to our last two pieces of baseboard here in the family room. But before they can go in, we need to install this mantelpiece.
Fireplace mantles like this come in pre-assembled or knockdown units with 4 pieces or more that you cut and fit to the exact size of your own fireplace. Now, there are certain building codes that require a distance between the wood on the mantel and the firebox, so be sure to check with your local building department to see what applies in your area.
Now, our fireplace is built out from the wall, so we could have ordered a mantelpiece with returns that would accommodate all this protruding brick. But we liked this style of mantelpiece so much that we decided to add our own returns.
This meant cutting and attaching 1x to the pilasters and laminating a strip to the mantel shelf. Which we later finished with a belt sander and an orbital sander. With all our parts cut and ready, we glued and nailed our custom-made returns to the pilasters. Then we attached the frieze assembly to the pilasters. Get out there, Jojo?
Yeah.
Okay, with this much assembled, we're ready to install it.
And our first step is to get it set in place.
Okay,
Oh, that's not bad. How are you on your end?
Huh? Nice.
Then, check the sides for plumb. Now, we can outline the sides on the wall here and make a reference mark at the top. With the mantelpiece out of the way, we take a block of wood that's the same thickness as our return, 3/4 of an inch, set it on the line, draw another line, and this indicates where our nailing strip will go. The strips are fastened to the wall with screws. They go around the brick to provide nailers for the pilasters and the mantel shelf.
With our nailers in place, we now want to set our assembly up against the wall here and plumb it. There you go. Now before we nail this up, we want it to fit tight against the wall. So we'll scribe a line onto the side here, transferring the exact contour of the wall onto the return. Now, this is done using a compass, setting it to the width of the widest separation between the wall and the wood, and then follow the full length. Then, using a block plane, we remove the excess wood up to the scribed line. Next, we can pre-drill and nail the returns for the nailing strips with 6-penny finish nails.
With the assembly in place, we can add on our top molding, which will be mitering so it'll fit the length of the frieze board. Before we cut, we pull the pieces apart, being careful not to mar them. Once we get our measurements, we make our cuts. Now we can glue and nail the pieces in.
You put your end down there first.
Okay.
You still up there?
Yeah. One piece at a time.
Now we're all set to put the mantel shelf up. But before we nail it down, we want to check to make sure the distance between the front of the shelf and the pilasters is the same on both sides.
I have a ½ inch.
That's what I've got. Then we scribe the top of the mantelpiece.
Next, we plane down the edge with a block plane. And then we sand to our scribe line with a belt sander.
Okay, all set here. Against the wall here.
There! Now we can fasten it down with glue and 10-penny finish nails.
And the last step is to install scribing strips to the opening of the mantelpiece. Can you get that one out?
There we go. There. Now, once these last two pieces of baseboard go in, it means we're done with the family room.
Now we want to show you a different type of molding that we installed here in the upstairs bedroom. This is called crown molding, and it's a decorative feature that runs around the perimeter of the room between the wall and the ceiling.
We followed the same installation procedures that we used on our baseboard, except here, of course, we were working on the ceiling instead of the floor. First, we set a piece of the molding in place and marked its bottom edge on the wall. Then we marked the location of our studs and ceiling joists. Next, we ran our first length along one wall, butting both ends in the corners. There we go. Using 8-penny nails, we secured it to the wall and the ceiling. Since the molding is pine, we could forgo the pre-drilling step.
Our next length needed one end coped to fit tight in the corner. In mitering crown molding, the piece is positioned on the miter table, upside down against the fence, and it's coped. A tip when making cope cuts is to run a pencil line along the profile. This helps guide the cut. We then installed this piece, butting the other end against the wall.
Our next length needed to first be coped for the inside corner and then mitered for the outside corner. In determining where to make our outside miter, we set our pre-coped piece up to the corner and marked the back side of the other end right at the outside corner. And this gave us the inside dimension for our miter.
Then we butted our adjoining length against the far wall and marked it at the outside corner. To strengthen the joint of the outside corner, we ran a bead of glue along the mitered edge. Then we brought our two pieces together at the corner, pre-drilling and driving a 4-penny nail to join them tight.
From there, we just proceeded around the room, making coped and mitered corners where they were needed.
Right there, that looks good.
As you can see, crown molding gives a room an extra richness.
Well, Jojo, I think this looks pretty good.
Yeah, I hope we sunk all the nails.
Now we'd like to take some of the finished carpentry techniques we just demonstrated and apply them to an older home.
We'll be installing baseboard and casing in a new addition that'll match the existing millwork of the house.
No, we should probably unload this. All right, I'll take the light one.
Yeah, what a guy. My hero.
There we go. We're going to clean up our act by giving our new Chevy S10 pickup a wash it's really earned.
This is an S10 Maxi Cab with 4-wheel drive. It's a new truck, but it's going to get dirty when you use one as much as we do. And here we go. This truck's been everywhere today. It really needs this wash.
A Chevy S10 is one of the hardest working compact pickups you can buy. An all-round helper for any major do-it-yourself job. We use ours for everything from running simple errands to hauling big loads like this fill dirt for landscaping.
It's easy to see that an S10 pickup is built for a long life. The cargo box is smooth inside because it's all welded. You won't find any exposed mounting bolts here to trap water and cause rust.
This Chevy is fun to drive, too, especially in 4-wheel drive with the standard InstaTrack system. InstaTrack lets you shift on the fly from 2-wheel drive into 4-wheel drive high and back again at any speed. You don't have to stop or even slow down.
Soap and water, that's all our good-looking S10 needed to shine again. And underneath those aerodynamic lines is a 4.3-liter Vortec V6 that's standard on 4-wheel drive S10 pickups like this one.
The popular Vortec V6 has 160 horsepower for some real towing muscle. Properly equipped with the Vortec V6 and other required equipment, a 4-wheel drive S10 pickup can tow up to 5,500 pounds. That includes trailer, cargo, and passengers. A 2-wheel drive model can tow up to 6,000 pounds, 3 tons.
To help you make stable, smooth stops, there's a standard rear-wheel anti-lock brake system. On 4-wheel drive models, the anti-lock feature operates only in 2-wheel drive.
An S10 Maxi Cab has the added room of a stretched cab. With optional rear jump seats and required front buckets, it can carry 4 adults. Or you can fold up the rear seats for extra cargo space.
Well, it's all clean now. Ready to go back to work and get dirty again.
That's the way it goes with a truck that does so much.
Chevy S10 pickup is another reason today's truck is Chevrolet.
And why nobody's winning like the heartbeat of America.
Depending on the age and architecture of your home, matching the woodwork can either be simple or a pain in the neck.
We found that the window and door casing of our 1926 vintage home was still available. And although we weren't able to locate the exact style of backband molding, we came pretty close.
The old windows in the house have a stool and apron that we'll be making ourselves for the new windows. And as for the baseboard, well, it's a 3-piece unit, and we couldn't find a base cap to match anywhere, so we had to have it custom milled.
All the casing and base will be pine, and later we'll paint it to match the old millwork. Now, it's a good idea when ordering millwork to let it sit around the house a couple days. This way the wood can acclimate to the temperature of the house and keep it from shrinking and cracking once it's been nailed up.
Now, typically, when you reach the finished carpentry stage of the construction, the doors are the first to go in. And the reason for this is that you want all of your casing in so that the baseboard will have something to butt up against.
There we go. The installation procedure is pretty much the same for all interior pre-hung doors.
There are exceptions, of course. Like here in the master bedroom, we're installing double doors.
That's a piece of cake. In this instance, we're installing the jamb without the door on it.
We're setting 3/4-inch blocks on the floor to raise up the jambs so they'll be the same height as the finished floor, which goes in later. Now, we plumb it up on the hinge side. That's good.
Okay, with plumb established, we can now secure the side casing. And then we want to hang the doors. And, well, say, Joe, how about give me a hand here real quick?
So you better get your hand out of there. All right.
And with the doors in, we want to check the head margin here for consistency. Up just a little bit here, Joel.
More?
Make some adjustments. That's good right there.
Okay.
And then nail up here in the corner.
Yeah, a little over there, all right? How's that?
That's good.
Okay. There. With the jam square and secure, we can now install the casing on the other side.
But before we do that, we need to extend our jamb. When we tied our new wall in with the old wall, we added a coat of plaster that brought it 1/4 of an inch past our door jamb. So by adding a 1/4 inch extension jamb, we'll bring the door jamb here flush with the new wall. In nailing up the jamb extension, I first pre-drill, positioning the nails close to the outside edge where they'll be covered by the casing.
You'll notice that our casing isn't mitered at the corners, but instead it comes to a butt joint. And we're using hook strip for our casing to match the casing around the rest of the house. And you've no doubt seen this type of thing in closets before with hooks in it, which is how it gets its name. Now on this casing, one edge is square and the other is rounded, or what we call radiused. For the side casing, the radiused edge faces in toward the door. And for the top casing, the sharp edge faces down toward the door. Our last step on this door is to install this back band molding. And it's milled on its back side so that it overlaps the casing. This back band will be mitered at the corners. And to establish our 45-degree miter, we cut a short piece which we'll first position up at the corner along the side and mark. And then along the top, make another mark.
For this, we're using 8-penny nails, driving them through the edge at an angle in order to draw the back band into the casing and the casing into the wall. There. A coat of paint on this door, and it'll look like it's been here 60 years.
Tell you what, I'll finish the back band on this side if you want to start on the pocket door.
Okay. Our pocket door here slides on a track inside the wall. This frame was installed when we put up the walls for our second-story addition. In fact, let's take a look at some footage just to show you how we did it.
The rough opening is double the width you'd expect to accommodate the pocket door frame. And these are available ready-made, but we assembled the track that's on the top and added this jamb that's along the side.
To install the frame, we first cut the bottom plate. And we slide the framing into place. Now it's a bit smaller than the rough opening, which allows us to shim the sides and make sure the frame is plumb and level. Then we can secure the rest of it.
Later on, we'll hang the door from the metal track that's up here, and then the door will be able to slide in and out of this pocket. It just takes up less room than a standard swinging door.
Looks like we got everything in here. The first thing we want to do is hang the door. Once that's up, we put on the casing and the stops. I'm starting by inserting a set of wheels in the track from which the door will roll. Next come the hanger brackets, which get attached to the top of the door with screws. All right, now we're all set to hang the door. Say, Jojo, any help you can give me here would be greatly appreciated. Why don't you stick that bar underneath? We angle it in the doorway, and using a pry bar, lever it up into the track, aligning the wheel posts so they'll engage the bracket. Then lock them with a clip. We're all set. Thanks. The next thing we want to do is adjust the door here for height and squareness, using this little wrench and adjusting these nuts up here. But ours seems to be working just fine, so it's time to put on the trim. This casing is installed just like the passage door, with one exception. Here we're nailing it up flush to the frame of the door. With the casing up, we then install the door guides. Now, these are fastened to the foot of the door to keep the doors rolling straight and preventing them from banging into the sides. And the last step here is to install the stop. These door stops aren't furnished with a door. We purchased 1 3/4 inch door stop, which would overlap the joint where the casing meets the frame and give us 3/16 of an inch clearance for the door. Since our stop is contoured, we're coping the corners. The stops go in both sides of the door. One side is nailed up, and the other is secured with screws so that it can easily be removed in case we ever need to take out the door. On the pocket side, the stop needs to be notched to fit around the door guides. Then it's just a matter of putting on the last piece of stop.
Hey, how's it going over here?
Pretty good. I'll just finish this up and then put on the back band molding.
Oh, looks like you did a good job. I'll start on the bifold doors.
Okay.
Bifold doors are made to fit certain standard openings which allow enough clearance for the doors to be adjusted plumb. And they can be hung from two types of jambs. A full jamb, like we've been installing on our passage doors that are anchored into the studs, or a half jamb. Now, a half jamb uses drywall as the jamb, and will have a header stop and a side stop positioned here at the corner where it meets the casing. Now, the first step in installing the bifold door is to install the header and the side stops, starting with the header stop. The stops are positioned right up to the face of the wall. I'm using a combination square to get it flush to the edge. Now, because of the contour of this molding, the side stops will need to be mitered and coped to form a tight joint in the corner. Okay, well, now we're ready for the hardware. And what we need to do is measure back 3/4 of an inch from the back of the stop to the jamb. I'm going to use this piece of 1x, which is 3/4 of an inch thick, to do this. This indicates the center of the door as well as the center of the track. Now I just continue the line along the top here, like so, and in the two bottom corners. Next, I'll center the sliding track and the head jamb on this mark and attach with screws. Then I secure the jamb bracket at the foot of each side jamb. The jamb bracket should be centered in the jamb so that it aligns with the overhead track. Next, I need to install the pivot posts on the doors. These are inserted into pre-drilled holes at the top and bottom of the doors. Then I snap the two vinyl slides in the track, one for each door, and make sure that they glide easily. Well, now we're ready for the doors, and we're going to start by inserting this bottom pin into the bracket. Then, with the pivot stop loosened in the track, I insert the top pivot into the stop. The other pin goes into the sliding guide. Now I eyeball along the jamb side of the door for plumb. You want the margin between the jamb and the door to be about even. And once you're happy with it, just tighten down the pivot stop. I duplicate the steps for the other door. Once both doors are in, I close them and check out how they meet in the middle and check out the margin along the top. This one's got to come down. Vertical and horizontal adjustments can be made by turning the adjusting wheels at the bottom brackets and repositioning the top pivots. The last step is the casing. And here, it's set back 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the stop. And it overlaps the drywall and part of the doorstop.
Here's your tea, Jojo. Set those down. Matching the windows with those of the house is a bit more difficult than the doors. The casing around the outside is the same, but there's the added feature of a stool and an apron. Now, there are two types of windows in the new addition, a double hung and casement. Now, neither of these come with a stool or apron, so we're going to make those and install them ourselves.
For the double hung windows here in the family room, it means removing this stop and installing the new stool up against the sash. And since the stop is wedged in between the sill, removing it is not going to be a piece of cake. Taking a sharp chisel, I begin by cutting away the stop at the outside end. Then, with a wider chisel, I cut out the stop along the base and pry it up and out. Finally, all the excess wood should be cleared out to provide a level base for the stool.
So, Jojo, you ready for me yet?
Yeah, in fact, I'll remove the rest of the stops and start on the fireplace mantle.
All right, that sounds like a plan. Well, with the stops out, we're ready to start putting the stool in. And for the stool here, we're using clear pine 1 1/8 inch thick. To prepare for the stool installation, we earlier took a look at the pine to see which would be the smooth side to face up, and we marked it. With this done, we're ready to make some measurements. The first thing we want to do is measure out 5 inches from the side of the jamb to determine the length of the stool, like so. This will give us enough room for the casing, the back band molding, and a little area beyond the back band. Then I cut off one end of the board to create a clean square end. And setting the stool up against the wall on one mark, I mark the other end for length. Now, I'll establish the inside dimensions where I need to notch out the ends so that they'll wrap around the corners of the side jambs. Then I measure for the depth of the notch, transfer that measurement to the stool, and using a combination square, I draw the lines. Now, I can cut for the overall length. Then, cut for the notch. First, I cut for depth using a power miter, being careful not to cut beyond the mark. Then, finish cutting out the notch with a handsaw. Do the same thing on the other end. The next thing we want to do is cut out the underside of the wood, so when we slide the stool up here, it'll go underneath the side stop and then drop off over the edge of the jamb. This type of cut is called a rabbet. To determine the height, I measure from the jamb up to the side stop. To make our rabbet, I'm equipping the table saw with an adjustable dado head. Now, the safety guard's been removed to make this type of cut, so great care must be taken, and the guard replaced when we're done. I've also clamped a feather board to the table to keep the work in place and prevent the wood from kicking back. The dado head makes a wider cut than a single blade. Still, for our rabbet, we need to make a few passes. All right, now before we nail the stool in, we want to round off the top and bottom edges with a block plane. I give it a few light passes on each edge. Then, I smooth it out with some fine sandpaper. Now, to secure the stool, I drive 6-penny finish nails through the stool into the jamb. Next comes the casing, and this is installed just like our doors with butt joints at the corners. I'm also attaching a center mullion strip and finishing it off with the back band. The last step is putting on the apron. This is a straight piece of trim that goes underneath the stool. It's usually slightly shorter than the span of the apron, but runs the length of the casing. A simple way to determine the length of the apron is to lay it up on the stool flush to the edge of the back band or casing, and then mark the other end. Once it's cut, I nail it up, making sure the nails penetrate the stud. Well, we moved ahead a bit. We have all the window and door casing done. We even got the fireplace mantle in. Now we're all set. Start working on the baseboard.
To match the existing baseboard in the house, we're installing 3 pieces: the baseboard, the base cap, and the base shoe. We had the base plane down from 3/4 of an inch thickness to 5/8 of an inch, and the top is rabbeted so that it'll interlock with the base cap. And for the cap to be shaped, the mill custom designed a cutting blade to cut the wood to this profile. And we didn't have a problem finding a base shoe to match since it's readily available most anywhere.
The order of installation is the base first, then the base cap, and then the base shoe. Now usually the base goes over the top of the finished floor. If you're installing carpet, it goes over the top of the underlayment. But in our case, since we're installing hardwood floor after everything's already in, we'll prop up the base the thickness of the hardwood floor and then install the hardwood floor after everything's in. Then once all the hardwood flooring's down, we'll come back and install the base shoe to hide any gaps between the baseboard and the floor.
Now, to prepare for the installation, we first mark the location of all the studs along the wall. With that established, it's just a matter of cutting and nailing the base, driving 2 nails into every stud. We're going to butt the boards together at the corners since this joint will be covered with a base cap.
For our base cap, we're coping the corners. This gives us a tight-fitting joint. Well, that pretty well wraps up the casing and base down here. Once we get the windows cased up in the master bedroom, tomorrow we can start on the wainscoting.
See you up there.
Okay, get this thing together here. Say, can you give me a hand here?
Sure.
I don't want to ding up the front of this. Up we go.
There.
Thanks.
We had to do some careful planning for our wainscoting project because of the number of framing elements involved. Well, for instance, first there are the plywood backing panels. Attached to these are the rails and stiles. These are cross members that create the recessed panels. And last comes the panel cap. That takes care of the wainscoting part. Then we have a filler piece that's applied to the foot of the wall to bring the baseboard out, with the base cap fitting in on top of the baseboard and against the bottom rail of the wainscoting. Our first step is to establish the height of the wainscoting. And to determine this, we're going to use the top edge of the mutton strip for a continuous horizontal line all the way around the room. Let's see. Now this line represents the top of the panel cap. And from here we go down the 1/2 inch thickness of the panel cap.
Can you grab the other end here?
You bet. Then we draw a level line all the way around the room where the top of our plywood and the top rail will go.
We'll also make a mark just above the top of the panel cap for the location of the studs. Now we're ready to cut our panels. We're cutting these out of 4x8 sheets of 1/4 inch plywood, 3 panels per sheet. For our room, we're using up 6 sheets. Okay, we'll start over here in this corner and measure out to the furthest stud under 4 feet from the corner, which will be this one right here. And taking our level, I draw a plumb line to represent the side of the first panel. Then I measure from the plumb line over to the corner to get the width of my panel, 33 1/4. Now I have to establish where this receptacle is. So I measure from the side of the receptacle over to the plumb line, taking into account the width of the receptacle. Now I measure down from the top of the panel to the bottom of the receptacle, again taking in the height. Before securing the panel, I want to check for fit. Looks good. Then I backplane the edge that will adjoin the next panel. I'm doing this to achieve a tight-fitting joint. Okay. To attach it to the wall, we're applying construction adhesive to the back side. Now I set the panel against the wall, making sure it's good and tight. Then I pull it back off and stick it back on again. This does 2 things. It releases a gas that activates the adhesive, and it strings it out for even more application. The panels are also nailed along the top, the bottom, and in the field at every stud. Then we continue around the room, cutting for receptacles, around windows, and backplaning the adjoining edges as we go.
Well, that looks like a workable length.
With the panels secure, we're ready for the rails and stiles. And these are 1x4 boards that have been milled down to a thickness of a 1/2 inch. And the bottom rail goes in first, so we need to locate its position on the plywood by marking a horizontal line all the way around the room. For this, we'll measure down from the top of the plywood, down 28 5/8 inches. And this represents the top edge of the bottom rail. With our first section of bottom rail cut to length, we glue it on the back and position it to our marks and secure it to the studs with 6-penny finish nails. In the corner, the rails will be butt jointed. Where the rail needs to be spliced together along the wall, we're mitering the ends at 22.5-degree angles. At each one of our receptacles, we're installing a filler piece that's made out of the same material as the rail and stiles. The idea is to create a frame around the receptacle so that a cover plate will fit flush with it.
With the bottom rail, receptacle pieces, and aprons all in place, we're ready to move on to the vertical stiles. The vertical stiles define our recessed panels. And the way we locate the spacing for the stiles is to measure the span of each wall and then break that measurement up into little segments that we think look the best. With that done, we mark the bottom rail where each stile will be centered.
Next, we set up a jig here on our power miter saw. And that way, all of our stiles are cut to the exact same length.
With our stiles cut, we mark their centers, apply glue, align the marks to the center marks on the rail, check for plumb with a level, and nail in place. In the corners, the stiles butt together. Now to keep these looking the same width, we've taken one of the stiles and ripped it down the thickness of the board. This way when they butt together, they look the same.
Now that all our stiles are in, we can install the top rail. It goes to our top level line and sits right on top of the stiles. Go ahead.
Okay.
This is installed just like our bottom rails.
Now we'll top everything off with panel cap. This is a 1x2 that's been rounded on the edge and rabbeted to fit right over the top of the rail. You can grab that, Jojo. Here, we're angling our nails to pull the cap down tight over the top rail. And we're mitering the corners.
Before installing our baseboard, we first need to attach a 3/4 inch filler piece which brings the base out even with the face of the bottom rail. And just a few nails to hold it till we nail our baseboard on.
Like the baseboard we installed in the family room, this too is butt jointed in the corners. Then the base cap is fitted over the base, overlapping the bottom rail by a 1/4 inch.
Now we're going to take on one of the most challenging carpentry jobs there is, the finish work on this wooden staircase.
It may seem a bit overwhelming at first, but if you take it one step at a time, you should be able to build stairways that don't squeak and railings that don't sway.
The first thing we're going to put up is the skirt board, and it goes alongside the edge of the stairs against the wall. It's kind of like a baseboard along a floor. The skirt board itself is 9 1/4 inches wide, but we're going to position its top at 9 1/2 inches, so I'll make a mark.
We'll be installing this nosing around the top of the stairway here. It's milled out in the bottom, so it fits right over the side like this with a finished edge. Now the skirt board will come up the stairway like this and die into the bottom. We'll install this later, but for now, I'll use this to mark the top where the skirt board will go, like so. All right. You want to grab the chalk line? Yeah. Okay, I'm on my mark right there.
Okay, go ahead. The chalk line will help us line up the top of the skirt board. Now we need to get its length so we can cut it.
You got it on there?
Yep.
All right, that's 84 5/16. Now that's to the top of the board. We also want to cut the skirt board so it's flush with the bottom of the nosing and this wall. So I'll need this measurement in here as well. Let's see, that's 6 1/4.
Down on this end, we want the bottom of the skirt board level with the subfloor and plumb to the corner. And in order to get it to fit flush against the wall, we'll need to make an outside miter cut at 22 1/2 degrees.
The next thing we need to consider is the rise and run of the steps to get our cuts just right. The first thing, the rise, or the height of the step, in our case is 7 1/4 inches, is basically the height from the first floor to the second floor divided by the number of steps. And the run, or the width of the stair, in our case, again, 9 5/8 inches, which is the opening of the stairway, again, divided by the number of steps. This is the material we'll be using for the skirt board. Thanks. And one of the main tools we'll be using for working on the stairway is a framing square. It really helps in laying out the rise and run. Where we position the rise and the run like this, and then draw a line for the cut underneath the nosing, which is also called the seat cut. And we turn this framing square and measure out 6 1/4 inches for the measurement underneath the nosing, and draw a perpendicular line to the plumb cut along the header.
There we go. Now we can measure along the top edge of the skirt board for our length. And that's where we're going to make that compound miter cut, right here. And the reason we turn the board over is because we're going to be cutting from this side.
We're ready for that compound miter cut, so I've set the saw to 22 1/2 degrees. right, our board's pretty well all set. It's just a matter of setting it in here along the stairway and putting it up against the chalk line. You got it in there, Joe?
Oh, there we go. We're using 8-penny finish nails that we drive into the studs behind the drywall. And we countersink them for a smooth finish. This material is particle board with an oak veneer, and it's got a radius finish on one side for an attractive edge against the wall.
All right, our next skirt board goes along out here. Now, because it's on the outside, we'll notch it to match our stringers, and the finished edge will go right along in here.
So we'll put this level up here, and that'll indicate the slope. Then putting the square underneath that, we'll make our mark where we'll snap the chalk line, which will serve as our guideline along here.
We've cut both ends of the board and temporarily nailed it up in place. This way we can mark the top so we can notch out for the rise and run. The easiest way to do this is to trace a stringer onto the back of the skirt board, like so.
Okay, you on the line, Gene?
Yep.
All right, we're half done with our skirt boards. Now we still need 2 more along this flight of stairs, and we'll follow the same steps in measuring, cutting, and installing them.
There you go.
Thank you.
We're taking off these makeshift steps so we can start putting on the real oak treads and risers.
Here you go. Now the first piece that's going to go in is the riser, and it's going to cover up all of this rough framing all the way down to the floor. Then we'll just work our way up. Now we're going to have to measure and cut each piece individually, and the reason is because you need tight joints for a sturdy stairway.
For the riser lengths, we have to factor in these decorative brackets that go over the skirt board like this.
Okay, got the height.
You got a hook there?
Yeah.
All right, now that's a measurement for the riser. Both the bracket and the riser will have a miter cut for a nice tight fit along here.
Got that.
For our risers, we'll be using solid 3/4 inch oak, 7.5 inches wide. For our first step, this height will work just fine. All we have to do is scribe it to the skirt board and cut it to length.
Scribing the risers against the skirt board here will help us match surface variations and give us a tight seam. But first, we want to make sure that it is even and flush with the stringers. That looks pretty good.
Yep.
Then I take my compass and run it alongside the skirt board and transfer the surface to the riser. And here's where I'll make my cut.
Then we saw along the line we scribed using a slightly angled blade for a nice tight fit. Next, we mark the length onto the board. Then we cut with the blade at 45 degrees for the miter joint.
We're ready to install this first riser. Now, oak is a very hard wood, and it's difficult to get nails through it, so we're going to pre-drill our nail holes. There we go.
We're using 8-penny finishing nails, driving 3 nails into each stringer to anchor the riser. The second riser is 7¼ inches high, so we use a table saw to rip the board down to size.
We went ahead and scribed this second riser. We used the same process that we did on the first one. Now we can install it.
Now we want to attach a couple of these brackets to our skirt board. We've mitered them at a 45-degree angle and cut them the same height as the risers.
The bottom bracket will be the first one to go in. We're just going to stick a bead of glue along the joint here. And then it just fits over the skirt board and forms a nice tight corner with the riser. Good. These are just a 1/4 inch thick, so we're using 4 penny nails. And we're using 1-inch brads in the joint to hold the corner firm. Then we secure the second bracket after shimming the second riser to make a 90-degree corner. We've gone ahead and scribed our first tread, and we've put down some beads of construction adhesive on the stringers. Now we can install it.
We just lay the tread over our rough stringers like so, pushing them up tight against the riser. Now we ordered it from the lumberyard to size it to the run of the stairway. And they come from the lumberyard with these little horns. Kind of a nice little return here over our skirt board. And this 1.25 inch overlap continues around over the front.
To secure the treads, we're again using 8 penny nails, but we're driving 3 into each stringer. The treads are actually oak strips glued together, and they're less likely to warp than solid oak.
It's not the easiest place to reach, but we also want to screw through the back of the riser into the tread.
All right, we've shown you the procedures for installing the risers and the brackets and the treads. Now we'll just move things ahead a little bit. It's ready. Finishing the steps took a lot more scribing, cutting, and nailing. So it took us a few days to work our way up to the top.
We're ready now to work on our posts and railings. We ordered the stair parts from the same company we got the interior doors from. This way there's a nice continuity of the product.
Our railings will run along the open portions of the second floor, along this side of the upper flight of stairs, and along this side of the lower flight.
We'll begin by installing our newel posts, which support our railings. This first one is called the starting newel. It has to be cut to the right height, which is determined by where the railing hits it.
Here you go.
Okay.
To get the railing height, put the short side of the square along the slope of the stairway, and then just slide it into the post, which should be plumb.
Plumb right there. Go ahead.
Make our mark. Okay, we'll get a measurement on that. And this is going to put us at 30 inches, which is generally accepted for stairways. However, local codes can vary, so what you'll want to do is check the guidelines in your area.
Now figure the railing 2 inches down from the top, and the difference between our marks is how much we want to take off the bottom of the post. And we'll do that using a circular saw. Got it there?
Yep.
Okay. The posts are made of oak strips glued together, which means they won't warp like solid wood. They're 3 5/8 inches square, so the blade's too short for just one pass. So we saw through the back to finish the cut. We cut our posts long enough to reach the floor, but we also want them to rest on part of the tread here. So we'll notch out part of the post like so and cut away part of the nosing.
We're setting all the posts 1 7/8 inches from the nosing. That puts them right over the drywall below and keeps them in line with the nosing upstairs.
We use a handsaw to cut into the nosing, being careful not to hit the riser below. Then we chisel out the wood to clear the space.
Your way. Yeah, perfect. With the post plumb, we'll go ahead and make our mark at 1 13/16, and then set the compass for that width. And scribe the edge of the riser to the post. We do that on both sides, and that's where we cut.
We use a circular saw to make these cuts. Again, we have to cut on both sides of the post because of its size. The circular saw comes up a bit short, but one hammer blow breaks the waste free. Then we chisel inside our cut to eliminate any bowing against the riser.
Pretty good over there. Well, it looks like we've got a pretty tight fit here. And our next step is to anchor the post to keep it from wobbling over the life of the stairway. We drill first with a 3/8 inch bit to bore holes for the screw tops. Then we drill smaller holes through the post and riser right into the stair framing. We secure the post with 3.5 inch screws. And we cover the screw tops with 3/8 inch oak plugs. That looks pretty good. Feels pretty sturdy. We'll install our second post the same as the first, notching it back so it sits on the landing and extends down to the tread.
But first we want to install this nosing over the landing to form the same lip that's formed when the tread comes over the top of the riser. We secure it with 8-penny finish nails.
After notching the post to fit, we screw it through the riser and into the framing. Then we move on to the upper flight, setting the newel post at the bottom of the run. This one will later rest on oak flooring, so we cut it and shim it accordingly.
That's nice and solid.
Good. Now we need another post here to support the railing that goes down the stairs and the horizontal railing that'll run along here. And another post will go right here to support the railing that runs along this hallway.
To maintain a smooth horizontal line here, we won't be notching out the post to fit on the riser like we did on the other ones. Instead, we'll locate the post here on the back edge of the nosing. And this one will go right in the corner like so. There we go.
Along the balcony, the height of our railing is going to be 36 inches high, which is required by code here for a horizontal railing. Again, that could vary in your area. Now we're going to be adding 10 inches to the height of the railing, and that's because we're going to be anchoring the post below the floor.
After cutting the nosing for the post, we check the fit and mark the position on the subfloor.
Got it.
Okay. Then we cut away that part of the plywood with a circular saw, revealing the floor joists. We mark the joist edges on the plywood and transfer those marks to the post. We remove the plywood to give us room to work below the floor, and we notch the post along the points we marked, allowing extra length for the portion below the floor.
Then, with some glue on the post, we set it in over the joist and plumb it on one side.
Got it?
We secure one screw to hold it loosely.
On the bottom? Come toward you.
Now we shim as needed to get the post plumb on the back side. And we secure the post by driving in the rest of the screws. Finally, we set the cut plywood back down around the post and nail it down to resecure the subfloor.
Burying the post in the floor like this gives real good support in areas that get a lot of wear and tear, like coming around the corner here. And the plan was to do the same thing in this corner. But unfortunately, we ran into a little bit of a problem. This is solid framing here for the floor, and obviously we can't cut that out. There's not enough room to slip a notch down. So we'll switch over to Plan B. That's to replace the nosing, notch out the new nosing end post, and install the post up against the riser like we did in the first part of the stairs. Still good?
Yeah. There you go.
All right, now this post is the same distance above the nosing as the one we just put in, 38 inches. And that's because it's supporting the horizontal railing that's running into the wall, as well as a railing running down the stairs here.
All we need to do now is finish nailing down the nosing around all the posts, and then we can move on to our next step tomorrow, which is putting up the railings.
All right, this is where we'll be installing our first piece of railing. And we've cut an angle at one end here to match the angle on our newel post.
And on the other end here, we'll be using these rosettes, which is the treatment we've chosen to finish the railings on the walls.
All right, now we can nail up our railing. And we want to position this 2 inches under the top of the post. Okay, you got it there, Joe?
Yeah. After leveling the rail, we use finish nails to secure the rosette to the wall.
Then on the other end, we screw through the rail into the post, and we use a channel underneath for this. The balusters and fillets will later hide the screw tops. All right, now we can measure for the next section of railing between these two posts here. Now be sure to keep your tape measure on the same spot on both posts. Okay, I got that. Now we can check the angle.
And here's how you determine the angle. The nosing and the railing are parallel to each other. So all we need to do is take our bevel square, set it up against the nosing, and rotate the blade till it's flush with the post. Tighten it down, and that is going to give us our angle.
We mark the length onto the railing and transfer the angle cuts, cut it with a miter saw, and secure it to the posts. Okay, you got it there?
Yep.
Okay.
Now we can start the railing that goes down the stairs. And again, we use the square and the level to pinpoint the top of the railing. The big difference here is the slope, and we'll be transferring that to the railings when we make our cuts.
Okay, now with the marks on our posts, we can determine the length of our rail and the exact cut we have to make.
Okay.
And to do that, we'll just lay it up against the posts on the mark and then draw in the line of our cut like so. We set the miter saw to that angle and cut the rail to length with the wood on its side. We secure the bottom from underneath.
Got that.
Up we go. But with a sharp angle on top, we have to nail that in from above. Then we cut and secure the second stair railing the same way.
Thanks. We're ready to put our balusters in under the railings. Right now, we're just trying to figure out the spacing. We're going to put 2 balusters on each tread and then a single one right here next to the newel post. So that's going to give us 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 along this run.
Now to position our balusters, we'll begin by putting the first one here right above the riser, like so. Put the one up on the next step, and then we want to position the middle one equidistant between the two. We'll double check that with our tape. Move that over a little bit, which gives us 3 1/4 inches between each baluster. Perfect. With the spacing established, we mark the locations of each baluster on the tread.
Along the treads here, we're using 1 long and 1 short baluster. And once these are installed, the tops are going to match up with the slope of the railing. However, we do want a little bit more of the tops to be showing, so we'll remove a couple of inches from the bottoms, and that'll sort of balance everything out.
Can we get these marked? All right. Before we can cut anything, we'll have to take a few measurements here. I'll get these down. So we plumb up from our marks for the railing, and then measure up into the channel. Okay, got this. All right, we're 29 7/8 plus 3 inches there.
Okay, let me get on that mark. There we go.
Okay, got it.
We know that we're going to need to angle cut all the tops of our balusters. So now we'll get that angle by placing our bevel square up underneath the railing. And that gives us our slope.
Then we cut 2 inches off the bottom of the balusters. Now, these are 90-degree cuts. And we angle cut the tops to the height we need for the balusters.
Oh, thanks. Once they're cut, they're ready to go in. Now, some baluster styles feature a dowel in the bottom, which helps secure them into the floor or the tread. Now, we don't have that, so we'll be resting them flush on the tread where they'll be toe-nailed in place. That looks pretty good. For that, we're drilling pilot holes in the oak balusters. We also apply some glue. We set the baluster in place, making sure that it's on the mark and that it's plumb. There, yeah.
Okay, that's perfect.
Then we nail in the bottom. secure the top.
Well, that's how we measure, cut, and install our balusters. As we move up the rail, we'll want to keep them all evenly spaced, plumb, and square.
Starting to look pretty good. Once the balusters are in, the railing really starts to take shape. So now we're ready to fill in the channel underneath the railing between all the balusters. And we're going to mark and cut each one of these. And if the balusters are spaced correctly, they should all be the same width, but we're double checking for any variations. This material is called fillet, and it comes with the railing.
It's a good idea to number the fillet so we can keep track of which piece goes in which space. Now, the fillet will rest flat against the rail, but we do have to cut for the angle of the slope. Now we cut the 14 pieces to fill the spaces on the first flight.
The fillets cover the nail and screw tops in the channel. They help keep the balusters locked in place, and they give us a finished look under the railing. Boy, Dean, those fillets work out well.
That finished the first flight.
Got a couple more.
The second flight took up the rest of the day, but we followed the same steps we just showed you. So let's skip ahead to when we started the work under the horizontal railings.
There? Well, we're nearing the end of our stairway work. We've already moved up to the second floor, and we're filling in the balusters that go under the railings here.
These balusters follow the same principles as those on the stairway. We first determined our spacing to match the look on the stairway. That told us how many balusters we needed. Then we cut some spacers like this to help determine our positions.
The spacing is really a matter of personal preference. However, you can't go more than 6 inches apart according to most codes.
Since the railing is horizontal, we cut the tops of the balusters at 90 degrees, and they're all the same length. We start at one end of the rail and work our way down. What we want here is a balanced look between the posts, which even spacing will give us. Fillets for the horizontal railing are cut at 90 degrees to the length of our spaces, and we fill those in as we go along. Hold it right there. Well, with the balusters done, that pretty well completes the work on the stairway. Now all we have to do is add a little stain and apply a nice finish.
Oh, but that's another job. We hope we've given you enough confidence to try some finished carpentry projects of your own. I'm Joanne Liebler.
And I'm Dean Johnson. Thanks for watching.
Hometime is made possible by Chevy Truck, who brings you Chevy full-size pickups. Today's big pickups for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Chevy S10 pickups, today's compact pickups that play as hard as they work. Chevy S10 Blazer, today's sport utility vehicle in 2- or 4-wheel drive. Chevy Astro, today's compact van with 2-wheel drive and new all-wheel drive models. Nobody's winning like the heartbeat of America. Today's truck is Chevrolet.
The National Hometime PBS series is brought to you weekly by Chevy Truck in conjunction with the Stanley Works.